Welcome to our February 23rd through March 1st astrology forecast and Tarotscope. I'm going to do the usual. We'll get a brief breakdown of the major astrological transits this week, and then we will get into a 3-card tarot reading to give you some more collective insight and tips on grounding through what is a very retrograde weather week. I want to mention before I get into it that you can always join me over on Patreon if you want more. You can also follow me on Substack at Feeling Loudly and on Blue Sky if you want to connect with me off of YouTube. But I highly recommend Patreon. I post bi-monthly new moon and full moon readings over there, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that's really cool and people dig it, and you might too. Okay, let's get into our reading for this week. So first off, today is Sunday, February 23rd. I'm recording this on the start of the week and on the day that Mars forms both a trine to Mercury and stations direct after a long retrograde. So this is a big day in Martial territory, and this is especially in focus in our Cancer house. So whatever house in your natal chart contains the sign of Cancer, specifically 17 degrees of Cancer is what is most in focus in this moment. But we also have Mercury in Pisces at 17 Pisces, which again is forming a trine to Mars. So let's start there, and then we'll talk about Mars stationing direct, which is a big deal. So Mercury at 17 Pisces again, trine Mars, which is in the process of stationing. And when we have a trine between Mercury and Mars, there's this combination of willpower and desire and our mental faculties, or the way that we communicate or listen or process. And so with the combo of Mars stationing and also trining Mercury, there's something that's coming into focus around our action and maybe our path forward. That could look like a sort of decisiveness that comes through, where we're feeling compelled to make a choice that brings us closer to something that we want. That can be a really beautiful manifestation of the Mercury-Mars trine. And it feels like there's, again, the word crystallizing is coming through. So there's something that is crystallizing in our minds that maybe we've been chewing on for a while, maybe throughout this Mars retrograde. And perhaps this is the day when we make a decision or communicate something or even just put ourselves out there in some way. That can be a very martial, mercurial action, is to kind of say the thing or do the thing or express the thing that we've been chewing on and reflecting on throughout the retrograde. I really like this trine. It feels good to me. It feels empowering, and it feels pretty exciting. The negative, or let's just say like the more challenging manifestations of this might look like us feeling a little bit more combative or a little bit more guarded, or just being kind of fiery or even impulsive with our communication. Mars is a planet that has to do with combat and force and anger and sometimes violence. And so sometimes our speech or our energy, the way that we communicate and share our ideas, can come across as a bit hasty or impatient. But I'm not generally feeling that. That would make more sense if either of these planets were forming harsh aspects to your natal chart. For the most part, it's feeling empowering, and there's an element of courage and fire and spirit that's shining through in the way that we express ourselves today, and I would take advantage of it. Again, later today, as I'm recording this on Sunday, Mars is stationing direct at exactly 17 degrees of Cancer. And so let me take a second to share some important dates with you that might mean something based on your personal retrograde journey. So Mars first entered its pre-retrograde shadow, meaning it wasn't retrograde yet, but it was journeying through the terrain that it would eventually retrograde back through. It first entered that shadow period on October 6th of 2024. So we're looking at last year. Maybe you remember what was going on around then, or maybe not. But this would be particularly relevant for your Cancer house. Again, so I would think about what house contains the sign of Cancer. On November 4th, Mars entered Leo. And then on December 6th, it stationed retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo. And so your Leo house was in focus in that regard. And throughout this time, we were also experiencing a Mars-Pluto opposition, which we still have yet to complete, but has been a quite charged feature of this Mars retrograde. When Mars stationed retrograde at 6 Leo, you may have begun to notice some sort of halting action, especially in your ability to progress or to make change or to pursue. Mars can be a planet that has to do with pursuit and conflict often. And so throughout this retrograde period, which again technically began on December 6th, we've been examining the way that we engage in conflict, the way that we advocate for ourselves and each other, the way that we show up collectively to fight and resist, and possibly where we feel disarmed or disempowered at times. And I say that in part because when Mars re-entered Cancer, which occurred on January 6th, we had Mars returning to the place where it is in fall, technically. And that generally means that Mars doesn't quite go about martial duties the way that we would expect, or with the same level of power and assertiveness that we would typically see from Mars if it were experiencing more dignity and support and all of this stuff from other factors. So we've kind of had, in a way, maybe our hands tied behind our back in some places. Maybe we've felt on the defensive, or we felt preoccupied by even fear or the desire and the need to protect. And that's something we've been examining and working with individually, collectively, relationally. On February 24th, again, well, technically 23rd, my time, we now experience the station. And so some of the themes that we've been working with throughout this Mars retrograde are now coming into focus. And so again, think about your Cancer house. Think about the themes associated with that house and what's been coming up for you. Have you experienced conflict or breakdown or aggression or the need to defend or advocate or stick up for yourself in that realm or other people? And what's coming into focus now? And maybe what have you learned about what you truly want and how you want to go after what you want? This could be a gorgeous time to set some type of intention around how you want to show up for yourself and for other people, for creatures, for the earth, and for any causes that you choose to champion that feel close to the heart, something that you're willing to fight for. Setting that intention around this time would be a great way to honor the Mars station. I just want to mention a little bit of future tripping for what's left of this transit. On April 18th, which is a ways from now, Mars will re-enter Leo, and then on May 2nd, it'll leave its post-retrograde shadow, which officially completes this journey. So that is all happening at the start of the week, and that's big martial energy. So I wouldn't be surprised if you feel influxes of energy and then decreases if you feel zapped or like really charged. I'd expect your energy to be fluctuating and maybe feel a little hype at times, or on the other hand, could feel like really tired depending on how it's hitting you. So just tend to your body and try to be there for yourself and definitely express and tap in and access the bigger emotions that are coming up so you're not shoving them down or suppressing. The next day, Monday, February 24th, the moon enters Aquarius, and this shifts our emotional energy from Capricorn, which they're two Saturn-ruled signs, and so it is more of a natural transition. But from Cap, we were attuned to the practical and the material, and now we're moving into the intellectual. This might be a time when we're feeling a bit emotionally detached or just needing a bit more space to process and to kind of like make sense of maybe all that's happened and maybe do some reflection, especially on this Mars retrograde journey. On Tuesday, February 25th, Mercury forms a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces. And so more Saturn energy. Mercury conjunct Saturn in Pisces can be interesting because it's so kind of like antithetical or like almost like paradoxical to Piscean energy to have this like sharp mental and then super like pragmatic and practical structured energy is the combination of those two planets. And it's a little unorthodox, but it can also offer us some structure and focus, maybe for our creative projects. This would be a great date to think about what you want to prioritize, emotionally even, creatively, intuitively, and to begin taking steps toward something that feels concrete, but also imaginative. And so that could look like a visioning exercise. It could look like art projects. It could look like collaging your dreams, doing something to kind of take the mystical into the tangible and make something from it. I'll add that this can be sort of a gloomy transit at times where we feel like our thoughts have turned a bit more depressive or dejected. And so watch out for that and understand that this is a passing transit. And so if you're feeling caught up in the mind or scarcity thinking, or just generally feeling a little bit lower or focusing on lack, that is likely, at least in part, the product of this transit. And it's maybe shifting you toward lack so you can shift your perspective, or maybe that's just where you're at for a couple days. On Thursday, February 27th, the moon enters Pisces, which technically opens up our new moon window. Later that day, Mercury will form a sextile to Uranus, and then we'll experience our new moon in Pisces. And I'll tease the fact that this whole week we're building up to Venus retrograde, to Venus stationing, which is on Saturday, and we'll get there in a moment. So back to Thursday, moon entering Pisces, we shift from Saturn-ruled Aquarius into Jupiter-ruled and even like Neptune-ruled Pisces. And so we shift into more of a dreamy space, away from more of the like intellectual, emotional zone where we're a little bit cut off from the deep feels, but like taking it all in and getting some space and getting perspective. We go into Pisces and we're suddenly in the ocean, we're in the sea. Pisces is the depths, it's the everything, it's the all-encompassing, and it can sometimes pull us under. Pisces moon can be very sensitive, very intuitively tapped in, and conscious of the sort of energy that is surrounding them and other creatures and people. And so you might feel more energetically sensitive as we end this week, as we head toward the end of the week. A lot of factors here that emphasize that we're probably feeling tired. And also in a reflective mood. Sometimes with the moon in Pisces, especially with this kind of new moon and all this extra energy going on, we might get a little bit caught up in dream world, which can be great. It's a great time to like indulge in a fantasy novel, watch a delicious show, spend time with a lover, get lost in an art project. Great activities to prioritize really Thursday through the end of the week especially. But when the moon enters Pisces, we might feel a shift, and sometimes that shift is into more of a grief space too. I like to mention that with Pisces, and it's not often talked about so directly, but Pisces can really kind of capture like the existential feeling of it all, like the ennui and the longing and the yearning, but also the like the dissonance between my dreams and reality. And so that could come up around this date, around Thursday. However, we do later that day have Mercury forming a sextile to Uranus. So Mercury in Pisces, sextile Uranus in Taurus. And there's something that's shifting. I like this transit. This offers some like tangible Taurus change, Uranus, but also some dreamy potential that sort of like collide together, and create something innovative. And so again, this is a great time to practice dream work, to explore your intuitive nudges, to do something different and to create something different or communicate something different. Maybe this looks like a spiritual practice that helps you see something from a new angle, or to just shift your thinking in a way that feels quite elevating and helps you kind of surpass something that's been holding you back and see a new way forward. Later that day, new moon in Pisces takes that energy and makes it bigger. It's a punctuation mark, especially since it's building right as we lead up to Venus retrograde. So it's very much mixed into that energy, this new moon and this whole lunation really is. It's also, we're heading into eclipse season. The full moon in Virgo, which comes after in like 2 weeks from now, is an eclipse, and that opens the like technical eclipse window, like the time between eclipses, but we're already in eclipse season as we step into this week. And so I would just be mindful that there's a lot of energy flying around, a lot of stuff happening collectively and probably personally for you too, and to really tend to your body and try not to throw too many variables in to make things more dramatic or intense than they need to be. Eclipse periods and seasons are a really good time to take care of our bodies, to rest when we can, and to back away from unnecessary drama and BS, and to like tend to ourselves. I will say more about the new moon in Pisces on Patreon. I'll release an audio reading this week that features reflection questions and dates to think about and prompts to consider the way that this is impacting you at a personal level based on your own chart. And the audio reading itself, that's all in the companion guide. The audio reading itself features really rich descriptions of the themes that we're working with and the invitations of this lunar cycle and ritual suggestions to really tap into it. So if you'd like that, along with our new moon in Pisces 3-card tarot reading, also an audio reading, you can join me over on Patreon starting at $4 a month to access that. And it's a really great way to work with the lunar energy twice a month. Okay, finally, let's talk about Venus retrograde briefly because this is a long one today. So on Saturday, March 1st, Venus stations retrograde at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. And this is a big deal, right? We just ended Mars retrograde and now we're headed into Venus retrograde. We have two relational planets that often speak to the way that we fight and another F word that I can't say and on YouTube, and the way that we relate and connect and love and show our love and receive love. And so they're these combative and then can be harmonious, but Venus is also the goddess of war in addition to the goddess of love. And so we're really exploring the way that we work with conflict and the way that we approach disagreement or disparity or lack or fear, anger in relationships of all kinds. And this Venus retrograde beginning in Aries emphasizes that because it's ruled by Mars. Aries is a martial sign. And so this retrograde beginning in Aries, and then we'll go back into Pisces, and I'll talk more about that in probably next week's reading. When it returns to Pisces, which won't happen until March 27th, so we have a little bit here, we're experiencing a shift back into the last degree of the zodiac, into mutable water from cardinal fire. Very big difference. But this first stretch, and especially Saturday of this week, is really going to start to reveal to us maybe some unhelpful patterns in our relationships, and especially the way that we advocate for our desires. And a lot of those martial themes from the Mars retrograde will be picking up, but now taking on a Venusian flavor, where maybe we ask ourselves how we advocate for justice and equity in our relationships, how we get our needs met, how we meet other people's needs, whether that's one-on-one, community, family, group, whatever. We're beginning to really consider how we can mend some bridges and maybe burn or break some others. Maybe some relationships need to break down in order to make space for some new growth ahead. And maybe others are coming together and forming new dynamics, new ways of relating, and new ways of understanding one another. Venus retrograde, I'm going to have a whole deep write-up on the Astrophile Substack, and that should be published in the next day or two. So if you'd like to read that, you can go to the Astrophile, that's astrophile.substack.com, theastrophile.substack.com, and subscribe, and you will get my article in your inbox in the next couple days. It'll feature tips and prompts for connecting to your own chart and for reflecting on some of the themes that might be relevant, especially from the last two Venus retrograde cycles that were in Aries and Pisces. Okay, that was a mouthful, and this is a long reading today, but oh well, we're here for it. Let's get into our tarot reading for today, or for this week. So our anchor card, our overall energy for this week, we have the Six of Swords reversed. Very retrograde vibes, very reflecting on the past. This is, again, a swords card, and so it's linking us into the mental plane. This is an Aquarius card too, and we do have the moon entering Aquarius this week. And so this might feel more potent on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday when the moon is in Aquarius. This card is inviting us to pause and maybe to return to something that we've already processed or thought we'd already processed and been through, and to ask more questions, to revisit it, and to get closer to it and examine it, because it's calling for our attention for a reason. So this might be relevant to your Aquarius house. That could be, doesn't have to be. This does feel like it's related to our two retrogrades that were sandwiched between throughout this week. And we are in a mode of reflection, right? That is the ultimate call of retrogrades, is for us to reflect and often to integrate what has happened or to make peace with the past. Sometimes the Six of Swords means that we're stuck. We're like fixated on something and we can't seem to let go. And so because we can't seem to let go, we keep rehashing it. And maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Maybe we're just causing ourselves pain. And so that might be a question to ask yourself this week. Are you ruminating or are you reflecting? And to really try to untangle those two and to be able to distinguish between them. If you're in a state of rumination, good time to get into your body, good time to rest, to tend to your basic needs so that you're not stuck just chewing something over or fixating or obsessing on something that is actually causing you harm or like discomfort beyond what's helpful, right? Discomfort isn't a bad thing, but if we're prolonging it because we're afraid to release something or to move through something or like come to peace or even like forgive, then it might be time to choose a different path. Our challenge is the Knight of Wands reversed. We have all reversals this week, very retrograde. Knight of Wands reversed, we're tired. We're feeling sluggish. We're feeling probably worn down, and like our get up and go energy is depleted this week. And that's very natural, again, with Mars stationing and with Venus stationing and with like all this stuff in between, makes sense that we'd feel tired. And so can you not overthink that, being the Six of Swords reversed? Can you not overthink it? And can you instead just make space for your body to express its needs in ways that are not always comfortable, but that are nonetheless important? Those signals that we get, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I need to rest, I can't stay in this conversation, I can't stay in this place. Like those limits and boundaries that we get from our energy and from our spirit and our body are really important. And it feels like this week paying close attention to those cues and calls is extra important because we have so much tugging at us, pulling us in different directions. And really, we're getting into the season, eclipse season, where like rest is paramount wherever you can get it. Finally, our gift this week is Judgment reversed. Judgment's traditionally associated with Pluto. I often think of it as a Saturnian card too, because this ultimately is like the card that is the retrograde. Like Judgment, if you could capture it, Judgment is really retrograde energy. It is more about taking stock of the past and looking back at our history and our choices and our moves and actions with more honesty and perspective and a bit more objectivity where we can get it. And so when we see it show up in reverse, however, sometimes we are lacking discernment, or maybe we're even being overly critical and our radar's off. We think we're being realistic, but we're actually being cynical. We think we're being honest, but we're really being mean. We think we're being real, but we're actually being judgmental or harsh. And so I would consider this week, when you get bursts of awareness around how your own behavior is kind of like a little off the mark, or maybe you did something you regret, or like you made a choice that wasn't super discerning, can you be gentle with yourself through that? Because that's actually the gift this week. If you made a misstep or a mistake, or if something didn't quite stack up or come together in the way that you'd hoped or expected, there's actually a hidden blessing in that. And so maybe something that requires your review, retrograde, that in itself is a gift. It's like you go back to something possibly with more discerning eyes or with gentler or kinder eyes. And in that return, you actually get to a place of clarity that is like rooted and true and not like consumed by shame or like self-cruelty or punishment or all the ways that that can manifest that are harsher. So can we take stock of our actions and kind of even tell our story in a way that is more accurate and less biased toward judgment and even cruelty? And can we be honest with ourselves and with other people about where we're at, what we need, where we stand, and maybe puncture the veil of illusion or fear that's keeping us from having more honest conversations and from really seeing each other for who we are as opposed to who we may want to be. That's all I have this week. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you get value from these videos and enjoy them and like my style, please do like, comment, subscribe, share with people you know who might like them too. And as always, you can join me on Patreon if you'd like more, and if you'd like to support my work and get a whole bunch of other cool offerings. It is the best way to show some love, in addition to sending me a tip down below. Thanks, y'all. I hope you have a beautiful week.